Hey guys, welcome to Live from the Nest here at the Hawke Media office here in Los Angeles. Really excited to have Daniel Chen, our head of media buying. We're really lucky to have him. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thank you. Well, happy to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. This is a new series we're starting. Obviously excited to get rolling with you. Daniel is our head of media buying. Been in the industry 17 years. Daniel, if you wouldn't mind, just give the audience a little bit of background on what you've been doing and why they should be listening to us today.
Yeah, had a lot of experience across numerous verticals and industries. Ran and managed digital marketing campaigns from paid search to Facebook to programmatic to omnichannel for some of the largest advertisers in the world like Procter & Gamble, Visa, Pepsi, also Home Depot. So a lot of experience, experience working with really large brands, but also with, in the last couple of years, really small brands, a lot of the DTC brands that, launched in the market, that grew. We helped them grow. We helped them bring them to market and grow. And then that got bought by Procter & Gamble and the other large CPG companies.
Love it. Yeah, excited to, dig in a little bit today. Really the focus of today is really going to be about targeting direct-to-consumer brands, understanding, what's working, what's not. Obviously, you have a lot of insight. You manage the biggest team we have here at Hawke. I believe it's 30 people now?
Yep.
30 people, yeah. So quite the army we have over here. Spending a lot of media, mostly Facebook and Google. Last year, I believe we spent over $100 million on advertising. So excited to dig into kind of what's working and what's not. So, as we kind of jump into this, would love to just hear a little bit about what do you think's happening? Catch me up to speed, or just an overview on what's happening on direct consumer marketing right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're getting to a point of almost like what I say an inflection point of where there is so many people launching direct to consumer DTC companies, and products, and then their best and the easiest way to get people to buy their products and market them is on Facebook and Google,
yep.
Right? Facebook and Google are really smart. They made their platforms extremely easy to put up a campaign, target people, and to sell your product.
Yeah.
And therefore, so everyone is doing it. And so we've hit this point of where there's literally saturation, right?
Yeah.
And so, you go on a news feed, you do a search in Google, you go on your, Facebook news feed, and all you see is ads.
Yeah.
And then it's just everything is an ad. There's not a lot of differentiation. And it's really crowded. And I think that's, we're getting to that point where it's really, from a cost perspective, it's really getting cost prohibitive for a lot of the smaller startup companies to advertise and to acquire customers efficiently on Facebook and Google.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you pull up, Instagram, Facebook, any sort of social network right now, and you scroll through your timeline, you see, almost 1/3 ad, 1/3 organic, 1/3 influencer, right? And they all start to blend together. And it's really interesting because a lot of people are worried about their privacy, but for me, I'm kind of the opposite. I want to see the most relevant ads possible, right? So target me as effective as possible. I'm probably a media buyer's best dream because I'm very likely to click through and buy right away.
Right.
Talk to me about what your thoughts are with influencer also making such a big impact with social media and not just media buying. Do you think that the budget is going to veer in kind of away from media buying towards influencer more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think people are looking for authentic connections, right?
Yep.
And people are looking for, brands that they can connect with, from a purpose perspective and that they can believe in. And then also, the biggest thing about social media is social proof, right? And so, and that's why social media is so, effective, right? If something is really new and you don't know about it, right? Like a product, but if your friends are talking about it and you see other people talking about it and you see an influencer that you trust or that you follow, that you believe in, talking about it and promoting that product, right? You're most likely going to click on it and be interested and then, and then most likely buy the product, right?
Yep.
So I think, influencer marketing from the last several years have grown significantly because of that, right? Because it is, a great way to social proof and connect with people who follow an Instagram or influencer and believe in them, right? And so I think it's just a great way to do marketing, outside of just putting an ad and shoving an ad in front of someone.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because you look at these like e-commerce superstars, right? Like brands like Movement Watches and brands like Pura Vida that have, gotten acquired for a big number, and people want to aspire to be like that, right? And we get that question all the time on the front end, like, hey, how do we get to be like that? And outside of my favorite answer, timing, right? They got to jump, right? They've been doing it 6 years right now, right? When CPMs were cheaper, there wasn't as much competition. They had a much easier playing field.
Right.
Outside of just having the best timing, what do you see? Whether they're new to market or more mature, what do you see the brands that are doing it best? What do you think they're doing to differentiate, or what do you think is working for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what they're able to do now is what they first done is establish a presence on Facebook, on Google, right?
Yeah.
Establish an organic presence, right? Establish a brand identity, get people to believe in their brand. They have a product that differentiates, that is a disruptor in the market. And so they had really, in the beginning, really those, what we call them, like, loyal customers, right?
Yeah.
And then what they did was, they diversified, right? So they diversified their marketing channels, their communication channels beyond Facebook and Google, right? So they did influencers,
Yep.
They did PR, right? They did, display, programmatic, right? They did even like event activations, right? They're now doing, now you see brands like Casper, and Dollar Shave Club is a classic, doing television,
Yep.
doing radio, doing podcasts, and now you see them doing even billboards as well, right?
Yep.
So I think the successful brands in the beginning established, basically a cult following, right? Digitally, got social proof, got people talking about it, got people buying digitally, and then they knew to go beyond that, right? To really expand, to really grow and to be successful, they just diversified their marketing mix, right?
Yep.
So they went beyond the digital platforms into offline, and to make sure that they're, messaging and talking to people, and their presence is in people's lives all the time, everywhere.
Yeah. And so you mentioned like a well-rounded marketing mix, right? One of the things I always look for brands when they're coming on board who think they're just going to find the magic potion on Facebook. What do you think the brands that have that great marketing mix but aren't necessarily performing well online, what do you think are some of the takeaways or some of the tips you could give to get them to typically perform higher? And try to think like a direct consumer e-commerce brand, because I know we could talk about different brands all day.
Yeah, so I think the tip for them is really to think about using Facebook and Google, right? Classically, Facebook and Google is used as a direct response, lower funnel customer acquisition channel.
Yeah.
But you can definitely use that. But you can also use Facebook, Google to build your brand, to build awareness as well, right? So I think you can think about from a keyword perspective on Google, non-brand keywords, or much more upper funnel, like why is this beneficial for me?
Yeah.
What is the best review? And then on Facebook too, right? Just much more brand awareness instead of promotional ads.
Yep.
We're talking about the benefits and how this is going to benefit your life,
Yep.
and how there's a brand purpose. So I think doing it that way, leveraging Google that way, and then building a funnel, building brand awareness, and then retargeting them with promotional messaging, a copy to convert them later on down the funnel, I think is much more effective.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the brands that we talk to, they want to jump directly into a ROAS scenario where they spend X and then they get Y, right? And I think
Right.
that the brands that I see that do it best are the ones that really focus on that middle funnel stuff.
Right.
Right? They're building out their blog, explaining why,
Right.
building out testimonials and case studies, examples of work, how
Right.
this is going to fit into their life.
Exactly.
High quality like lifestyle and video, all that
Exactly.
type of stuff really
Content.
makes a big difference.
Right, great content, right? So you think about you're taking the long game here, right? I think a lot of brands, what they fall into is because of the effect, so historically effective of Facebook and Google, and you can measure it right away. So, everyone takes the short game. What am I getting? I'm spending $1. What do I get out of it immediately, right?
Yep.
But if you think about it, is like consumer behavior is not like that, right? How many consumers who don't know something of a product will literally click on an ad and buy that right away?
Very
right?
few.
And how many of them will look at a Facebook and Google ad and be convinced to buy a product right away, right? So if you look at consumer behavior, they're going to go out, social proof, they're going to do research, they're going to go online, do research, they might ask their friends, they might try to look at other publications, they're going to go out and think about these things, right? To say, okay, is this the right product for me? I'm going to buy, right? So if you think about consumer behavior, it's beyond Facebook and Google, right? So when, by diversifying your marketing mix, diversifying your content and your communication, right, you're going to be able to take the long game and therefore help, hopefully convince a consumer to buy a product.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, one of the things that's really interesting is that there's competition in a lot of different ways, right? Right now, any industry you want to think about, there's competition. How do you think about differentiating yourself as a brand that is really trying to deliver a valuable product versus the drop shippers, right, that are trying to look like they have a really valuable product and really look like a valuable brand, but are really just have really wide margins so they can spend money on marketing? How do you think you differentiate between those two?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you differentiate by, it goes back to what I talked about earlier about like brand purpose, right? Like what is your brand stand for? Why, the brand story, why you created a product or a service, right? And how is it like higher quality, right? You got to think about like, are you selling a product or are you selling your brand, right? And like, I think that's the biggest thing, what people kind of get hung up on or don't understand is people are not buying products, people are buying a brand, right? And if you can get people to buy your brand, you can have them for a lifetime. So that's the biggest thing is really selling your brand instead of selling a product.
Yep, absolutely. And one of my favorite like e-commerce metrics that I think about is, universally across e-commerce, less than 1 in 1,000 people convert the first time they land on a website. Right. So dropping those little nuggets and those little tidbits throughout, like made in America, organic, those little tidbits that show
quality,
people quality.
Right. The reasons why it's made in America, why we choose to, do have these types of ingredients? Why do we choose to make this in a certain way? And what's the reason behind that, right? I think those are the things that really help a brand stand out.
Health studies, and I've been in a few meetings with you where you always want to talk about the founder story.
Right.
That makes a big difference, right? Because that just shows, typically a drop shipper is going to be in and out of the game in 6 months.
Right.
Where a founder is going to want to tell the story, like this is why we started this company, and this is the impact we're trying to make. So if you could tell that story, it adds to the marketing mix.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's obviously a lot of changes happening. I know we talked about Facebook and Google, and I think that'll be foundational for any brand, right, over the next, let's say, at least 5 to 10 years. Where do you think some of that media spend right now could be going for brands that are ready to, increase their marketing mix?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first ones you can talk about, even from a digital perspective, is probably site direct. And what I mean by site direct is leveraging working with certain publications and platforms that are relevant to your audience and to your target consumer, right? So if you're selling women's clothing, just for an example, right, you can even think about maybe like Refinery 29 or Pop Sugar, right? So so things like that. That's a great way, working with sites that directly. Also digital audio, so podcasting is a great way, right? Podcasting is a very, you have listeners who are really engaged, right? They believe in that podcast, right? And so, so that's a great way to do it.
That's a perfect plug for this podcast,
right? Exactly. You can, even from digitally streaming television, right? There's everyone reads it every day. People are quote unquote cutting the cord, not, signing up for cable TV and not watching live television at that certain time. So, streaming TV, connected TV, that's another way to diversify as well. And then beyond that, even traditionally as well, right? So, there's always, I think traditional advertising really doesn't get its due. I think traditional advertising still can be very effective. And what I mean by traditional advertising, classic television, linear TV, right? So, when someone is willing to watch a show live at that time, they're really engaged, right? Because they want to watch their favorite show every week at 8 o'clock on a Thursday, right? So, and then also like out of home, like billboards is still very effective. There's also radio, regular terrestrial radio. There's also print magazine. Nothing still beats a print magazine if you can create a great image and great, beautiful, creative and show a product in a beautiful shot. And nothing still beats that, right?
And what's great about that is what we do on Google and Facebook is going to compound all those efforts, right? You do a billboard, right? You get that initial impression. They find out about it. They hear about it. Maybe they look it up. Maybe they don't. But if they do, you're going to be the one that pops up, and we're going to be following them around on Facebook and Instagram, retargeting, trying to get them an email. So all of those efforts are still compounded by what we do. It's not like you have to do either or.
Right, exactly. It's really holistic marketing, and so it has a holistic effect. And it goes back to what I talked about, right? It's like, consumer behavior. No one's going to be convinced by just looking at one ad, either Facebook or Google, whatever it is, and right away, right? So you want to be present, and you want to keep them in top of mind, as you said. So they saw a great, billboard a sort of great commercial or sort of great print ad, and then they do a Google search, right? Or they saw an ad on Instagram. They go, oh, I remember that. That's really cool, right? Click on the ad and they'll be convinced. Right?
Yeah, and I also love, and always have loved strategic partnerships. Right, like I just mentioned, we went to Alfred's Coffee and there's a ritual coaster around it.
Right.
Or Poplin Barkley just became the exclusive CBD provider for Equinox.
Right.
And like these really great strategic partnerships
Yep.
that have the same audience. GoPro's known for doing amazing one-on-one where, hey, we know that it's the exact same audience.
Right.
Let's do a great campaign together, a giveaway, a co-marketed billboard.
Yeah.
Like, those are really awesome.
Yeah, Red Bull is probably the best classic one, right? So Red Bull's, sponsoring, 3-on-3 basketball tournaments, right? They sponsor. They have how many racing teams, right? And so and then they did that guy the spacewalk, right? So those partnerships is a great way to reach your relevant consumer and drive and reach, right? And so I think those are other ways in terms of marketing and communications, in terms of diversifying your mix.
Yeah, and those can be not always, but can be lower cost ways to get brand awareness and really build that brand equity when people recognize your brand. They're like, oh yeah, that's the brand that works with GoPro, or that's the brand that's only at Equinox, right?
Exactly.
So you start to build brand equity and get people to think highly of your brand.
Right.
Especially as we start to move into a lot of these brands like cannabis brands and CBD brands where you're not allowed to do Google advertising at all.
Right.
You're able to do a little bit on Facebook and Instagram, but not very much.
Right.
You're not allowed to do typical SEO best practices. We get to, swing that pendulum back away from digital into a little bit more traditional marketing.
Right.
Things like Gorilla, right? Like one of the brands that we're talking to right now is they have a graffiti team.
Right.
And they're doing legal graffiti, but that's such an incredible way to get your brand out there, right? Because especially with that demographic, that's a really great way to get some brand awareness.
Yeah, it goes back to like brand purpose and lifestyle, right? You want to be part of people's lives, and you want people to believe in your brand, right? And these are great ways to do that, right? Like a lot of cannabis and CBD brands, and CBD brands are want to be part of people's lives from an everyday perspective, how they improve their lives, right? So I think that's a great way when they see that in association with at Equinox and at other places. It's like, oh, that's great, right? So that's great marketing. That's just what all this comes down to, right? That's just great marketing.
And those advertising restrictions are probably my favorite thing about the CBD and cannabis market right now.
Yeah.
Because what we see, new brands come out, you can tell when they got a lot of funding, right? Because you'll just see it everywhere. Facebook, Google, Instagram, billboards, TV, radio. You're like, okay, they're everywhere. Like Hims is one that I just saw literally everywhere all of a sudden. And you're like, wow, they raised a ton of money, obviously, and now they're just advertising to everybody. Right. But brands like cannabis and CBD brands, the playing field is level for these guys because they can't just overpower the market with TV and billboards and Facebook and Google. So I love that because it kind of levels the playing field, and all these brands are going to have to duke it out based off of real branding.
Yeah, it forces them to be really strategic, and it forces them to be really creative in their marketing. It forces them to really understand their audience and who they are as a brand and their brand purpose and how to speak to them. Yeah. Right? I think and because of that, great marketing will come out of it.
Yeah, and it makes our job really fun, right?
Absolutely.
We get to think outside the box.
Right, we get to be creative and really strategic and do really things that that can really connect with consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm always curious about, and I think it's so different per brand and per business and per client, but I'm curious from your perspective, from doing it for so long, what are the key performance indicators or KPIs that you see a lot of brands keep really close tabs on that you don't think should be as closely watched? Or what do you think are some of the most overrated key performance indicators?
Yeah, that's a great question. Over the years, we've had, I've had a lot of experience in people focusing on the wrong metrics, and some of the wrong metrics, in my opinion, I think are, like CPM, cost per 1,000 impression, click-through rate, CPC, average position, even cost per engagement on Facebook as well. I think those are, vanity metrics that you're looking at that are just, doesn't really look at what are they driving business results, right? Yeah. So, the analogy I can make is like, does it really matter if your cost per click or CPM is either $5 or $8 when your product is $100, $50, or $80, right? So, it is valuable, right? So, like you have a valuable product, and if it's valuable to the customer, right, and you're going to get people to buy, that impression, that click is valuable to you. So regardless if it's lower, it doesn't really matter, right? So I think those are, a lot of people get hung up on those things. And then also like click-through rate and, and things like that. It's like, well, not everyone, consumer behavior, not everyone clicks on an ad. A lot of people will see the ad, they'll come back, they'll type in the URL, they'll go back to it later, right? So, and then they'll buy. So it's not really an indication of performance.
Yeah, it's funny. I agree. I look under the hood on Google Analytics and all sorts of platforms all the time, and those are ones I typically skim right over. The ones that I like to look at more, I'll discuss in a second. But what are some of your favorite KPIs where you're like, these are metrics that really matter and should really closely be monitored?
Yeah, that's great. So, ROI, ROAS really matters for me, right, in terms of overall business and sales metrics. Customer acquisition cost. How much is it costing you to acquire one customer in totality? Advertising and also other, costs that you are accruing to acquire. I also look at customer lifetime value. That's a big thing, right? Because that goes back to, it might cost you an X amount of dollars to acquire that customer, but that customer worth to you over a lifetime could be exponentially more, right? So you're willing to pay more for that, right? So those are unit economics as well, right? How much is costing per order, average order value is another metric I love to look at, and frankly here at Hawke we always focus on and we try to optimize towards.
Yeah, it's interesting. We work with a lot of different venture capitalists and angel investors at Hawke, right? Those are some of our biggest referral partners. The ones that I like to look at for brand velocity, right? Because I'm also always looking for brands that we can really blow up, right? Not necessarily get from 0 to 1, which we do all the time, but I really like working with brands we can get from 1 to 10. And some of the things that I look at that typically tell that, time on site, right? The more time on site, the more interested somebody is.
Engaged.
E-commerce conversion rate. Those are ones where I'm like, okay, I saw one the other day for a CBD brand that had 8% e-commerce conversion rate. And I was very impressed by that, right? Because that's probably one of the highest I've ever seen for someone who's got, I think they had about 30,000 uniques a month. So a lot of brand velocity. And then the other two, which I think are important to understand and measure your community, is your social followers, right? How many people are subscribing to your brand, and your email list size, or growth, right? So growth on each side as well, because that shows how many people are subscribing to your business, or subscribing to your brand, your lifestyle.
That and and then also how many people are going to your site. So like growth and traffic to your site as well. That's another big one. That shows that more people are aware of your brand, more people are going to your site, more people are going back to your site as well, right? So those are really important metrics to look at, and that what we optimize towards here at Hawke.
Yeah, absolutely. What's funny is that we keep track of all of them, right? We keep an eye on all of them, but the ones that we like to look at can kind of differ between strategies and experts. We work with a lot of founders. We work with a lot of CEOs, people that aren't necessarily in the weeds, behind the scenes doing all the marketing, but they really like to see things from a high level view. What do you think some of the things that founders and CEOs might be overlooking of their brand?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think what they might be overlooking is really how are people talking about that brand, customer feedback, right? What are people saying? I think there are a lot of sometimes they get lost in in their own little world. And so really the whole reason why you want to do a DTC, direct to consumer, is to understand the consumer, right? That data coming back, right? I think, a lot of CEOs and founders are so worried about growth and metric, which are very important in sales, but also taking a step back and looking, well, what are people saying about my products? What are people, reviewing, how those reviews are? What's all that feedback, and how I could feed that back into the product and evolve the product as well.
It's interesting, right? A lot of people don't want reviews on their website because they don't want to hear the reviews.
Right.
I've heard that before. Like, we had reviews, we had to take them down. But, that's a good opportunity to grow as a brand. And then one of the things that's also really interesting is this huge push away from retail and directly into direct consumer. And the brands that were huge in retail are now going. Do you think retail is going to die? How do you think that's going to affect, the future of commerce?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think retail will always have a place in the industry, for a number of reasons. But the retail space is evolving, right? And so And it's evident by you seeing a lot of brands, as you talked about, you see a lot of digitally native brands that are opening up retail spaces, right?
Absolutely.
I think retail has its, effectiveness because you can touch and feel the product, right? You can get other people to social proof, other people review, right? I think there's always will be need that, but the retail model is shifting. So I think that the best analogy I can make it is Bonobos, right? So Bonobos was, they opened those guide shops, right? So you could not necessarily buy something at Bonobos. They don't store inventory at Bonobos, but you can go into a Bonobos guide shop and try on their clothes.
Yep.
Feel the quality of clothes, try on the right size, and then they'll give you an iPad so you can order it right away, right? So I think there's always a place for retail. Retail is, another great to expand your reach and audience, right? So Casper's opening up stores, Ball and Branch, Warby Parker, right? So, it's also a great way to also test products as well, right? And get right away consumer feedback. I think you're going to see less of those 5 million square foot stores, right? And you're going to see much more of the smaller pop-up size stores, right? Storefronts, and you're not going to see it in big malls or big shopping areas, but really thinking about relevant, so who your target audience is, right? And who are people are going to buy, and then opening up stores or pop-up stops, locations in those neighborhoods, non-traditional retail locations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I think it's a marketing expense, right?
Yeah.
For things, there's just certain things that you're not going to buy online,
right?
If you haven't tried it. Things like drinks, right? You're not going. There's almost no chance that you're going to buy a drink online that you haven't tasted,
right?
Unless it's like the trendiest drink of all time.
Right.
You just want to give it a try and you can't get it.
Yeah.
But most drinks, things like bed sheets, things like T-shirts, like there's just certain things that you want to try, and so I like to think of think of retail as almost a marketing expense.
channel.
Yeah, and just think of it as you don't even have to break even.
No.
You spend marketing dollars. That's just going to increase your brand lift. It's going to get people exposed to your brand. And then if you get somebody that converts offline, that saw your brand offline as well, you can look at ways to increase their customer lifetime value, build out referral campaigns, do all these things.
You could remarket them. You're going to have their information, you're going to have their email, and you can remarket them to upsell them and cross-sell them.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a great point, right? Like I think, shifting that model of, the KPI of what retail is, right? And looking at it more as a marketing channel versus as a sales channel.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's really fun for us because we get to do these kind of things and we get to work with a lot of brands. We get to look underneath the hood of a lot of different companies. What excites you most about working with an agency like Hawke? How long have you been here now?
5 months.
Yeah, 5 months. So it seems like yesterday. Time flies.
Yeah.
But what's some of your favorite things about being at an agency like Hawke, and what excites you?
Yeah, what really excites me, it's the number one thing is helping brands grow.
Yep.
I think, working with founders and CEOs who have a great founder story, who've done, who really created a product or created a service, that they really truly believe in and that they think that could really differentiate, right? Getting behind that, right, and then helping them really scale and grow, just really excites me. Yeah, and helping them possibly disrupt the world because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun, and there's a really great energy at our office. We're excited. Well, thanks for coming in, man. It's been a lot of fun having you.
Awesome.
We're going to be doing
Thank
a lot
you.
more of these. Looking forward to having the next show. We're going to have our VP of Marketing, Gian, on the show. So thank you so much, and look forward to connecting soon.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, see you, man.